let's first finish off the last paragraph of the chapter, The Prophet and the Messiah. Okay, you recall that I suggested that by having positional preens in a culture that defined positions within the culture that had huge amounts of mutational power, but had few requirements for at least asserting that you filled the requirements, that was a dangerous thing for a society to have. And that the impact it's had on the Jewish society has been pretty devastating, I would say, given that uh, Christ came along and then Muhammad came along, and they then began preen wars with Jewish society, and they have prevailed. Okay. The last thing, which we apparently didn't cover, was that Islam removed the possibility of future prophets from its cultural preset. Okay. They got rid of that danger because, to quote the Quran, Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the last of the prophets. So he is saying that, hang on a second. Okay. So, right. So prophets were a danger for the Jewish cultural preset, but in Islam, they got rid of that danger. All right. Another thing, and I don't know, if any of you are Muslim, maybe you could enlighten me on this. But it also appears to me that they have sort of modified the concept of Messiah. See, my understanding is in Islamic society, there's considered the people of the book, and the people of the book are people who uh, have the Torah as part of their cultural preset. And but there were these two dangers in the Torah, the prophets and the Messiah. And Islam put an end to the prophets. And but it also appears to me that they modified the concept of a Messiah, and that in Islam, the mutational power that is given to the Messiah is much diminished compared to in Torah society. And there are more requirements for the position. So I just remark that this is something that Islam seems to have done for whatever reason. Okay, any comments on that? All right, I wanted to return to a topic that's come up in a few forms. And that's that there's this idea about that the goal of societies is to take care of the members of that society. Yes, that's what it's for. Societies are ways that the members can be taken care of. And okay, now let's look at that for a bit. Um, so consider China, Russia, and America. Do each of those societies have poor and infirmed people?
Yes.
Thank you, Akriti. Of course they do. Uh, how much do they spend on their militaries?
A lot. Um,
Yeah. Who said it?
sorry, this is Nathan Johnson.
Oh, hi, Nathan. Okay, you're not visible. I mean, at least your image. Okay. Yes, a lot, right? A real lot. Okay. So why don't they spend it all uh, on the people? Use all their wealth and resources to make the lives of the people better. Why don't they do that?
Because there's risk that other societies will just like invade or just take them over.
Exactly, exactly. So that makes it, I think, fairly clear that the struggle of a society to survive is not simply the combined struggles of the individual members to survive, that the society is trying to do something else than just help the members. Okay. Um, yes. So the society is concerned about its struggles with other societies. And okay. Now there's a famous line that people often talk about. Well, I don't know if they often talk about it, but if you're interested in these kinds of things, you might think they talk about. And that's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Thank you, Akriti. A little more discussion, please. Makes it more fun for me and I learn things. Okay. Um, so this idea of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which is due to Jeremy Bentham and was put further or championed by John Stuart Mill, um, and is called, I guess, utilitarianism. And they are asserting that societies uh, should take actions and organize themselves so as to produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Okay. Um, what should we think of that assertion? Do you like the idea?
Uh, it can be used to arrive at some interesting extremes. So like if you've ever taken like an undergraduate ethics course, they'll give like the classic examples of like should they kill one person to save 10, etc. So there are definitely some like fundamental flaws in this. I mean, it's not really like a theory, but like I guess moral philosophy.
Okay, yeah, good point. And I don't know much about moral philosophy. But where did this idea come from? I mean, where did ultimately many societies come to incorporate, at least in some form or other, this greatest good for the greatest number? And so what I'm asking is, where did that preen go from copy number 0 to copy number greater than 0?
So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but
Jose Luis?
yeah,
Huh?
Well, I mean, this is like one version of the golden rule. I guess I'm not a historian of morality, but it seems to have been widespread since antiquity. I mean, a different versions of it.
Mhm.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
well, actually, it's not. Sorry, actually, it's not quite. Sorry, I said something silly. I'm doing
Yeah,
it at the same time.
it's related, but
Apologize.
thank you. Um,
But yeah, this is
but
utilitarianism. Yeah. Okay.
okay,
But
but I would we could just as well take the golden rule. When the Earth was just forming 4.6 billion years ago, um, was the golden rule there?
we assume that we're not humans, so no.
Thank you. Yes, the answer seems to be no. So it emerged. I mean, I guess one could say it's something that grew out of the earth, like animal life and plant life and mountains and stuff. It formed, right? That is, it has no enduring transcendental sort of status. That is, you may think it's a real good idea for a society, or you may think it's a lousy idea for society, but it has no position any more than if I were to say, um, just dream out of my head, uh, the greatest good for the greatest number of people years. That's, not just the greatest number of people. It's more important to make good for a number of years for each person. We should add that up. Is that a better idea than this? Is it a worse idea? How do we judge? Well, the point I'm making uh, is that these ideas are the ones we're talking about now, are human creations. They have no special place, for example, with regard to the notions of truth and the like that we have, or at least not a well understood place by most people. Okay, so people of a society may think that the Bentham Mill idea is a great one, awful one, but the cultural preens could care less. The cultural preens of a society may include the Bentham preen, or they may not. If it is included, it is not because of concern for the humans, but because it helps the cultural preens to survive. This is, I think, a very different way of looking at many of our sacred ideas than probably most people had. Okay, let's see. All right, well, let's just get into the book then. All right, so going to start, hang on, going to start on this chapter, the social ecosystem.
The societal ecosystem.
Societal.
Societies frequently contain subsocieties. For example, the American Society contains the California Society, which contains the Los Angeles Society, which contains the Walt Disney Company Society.
Do you see that? That there are these societies, and then within them, there are other societies, and within them, other societies? Yes? Okay. Well, there are. All right.
Each of these sub-societies will have its own cultural preset and positional cultural preset that indicate the positions available, the rewards, and the requirements for obtaining them.
Okay, so, within the Walt Disney Company, you can become the CEO, or you can become occupy any number of other positions. So, to some extent, one could say those positions are part of American society. But when looked at, I think, a little more rigorously, American society has its own positions. And then these sub-societies have additional, roughly, positions. Okay. And so the collection of all positions in a society is really perhaps best viewed as the collection of all of the positions available in all of the sub-societies. Okay. Oops. What happened?
These sub-societies are often in conflict, fighting for resources. The collection of sub-societies form a kind of societal ecosystem.
Okay, so can you think of two sub-societies of American society that are often at war, fighting for resources?
The Democrats and the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that comes to my mind immediately, given the zeitgeist, right? And yes, they are constantly at war with one another. And the Walt Disney Company is constantly at war with Universal Studios, I guess. Okay. And uh, more generally, these sub-societies are fighting for resources that are available. And let's take a step, and I want to talk about this a little more, or I want to say a prelude. As we know, the Democrats and the Republicans, or we could say more generally, the left and the right, whatever you prefer, are indeed in conflict. Okay. Now, if I were wearing my Len hat, I might have an opinion on which side I want to win or lose that conflict. However, as a preen theorist, I don't care at all. But what I can observe is perhaps how they go about it, what their prospects for winning and losing are, right? So without actually stating political preferences, can anybody say anything about this current conflict that has preen theoretic content?
So I'm gonna try and put this very lightly, but the way that I see it is that one party seems to be more in line with, like, I guess, utilitarian kind of ideals, and the other party seems to be a little bit more in line with, like, advancing self over others, both on like a local scale, so like for the individual, and also like on a global scale, like, America before other countries.
I like that. I like that, the way you express that. So what I see is going on there is you're articulating the fact that these two sub-societies have different cultural presets and sometimes antithetical cultural presets. Yes, they believe in different things. Yes, they have different cultural presets. But here's another observation I could make about this situation is what we should expect is that whoever wins the next election, let's stay away from this one, whoever wins the next election, we can be pretty sure that among the things they will do with the newly acquired mutational power that they gain by winning that election, is they will rob resources from the other party and give them to their party. This will always happen. What do you think of that?
I agree that whenever
Anthony?
I agree that if like one party wins, then they will like try to fund their wants and their beliefs or whatever they like.
Mm-hmm. They will strengthen themselves by taking resources from the other and giving them, using them themselves to further, their societal, cultural preference, right? Okay, that's something you can be virtually guaranteed of.
So if I can say, so I mean, I have a number of questions, but with respect to that point, you're putting all this as a zero-sum game. So if somebody wins resources, then the other loses. But I'm not sure if that's really all that is happening, because you can come up with new prims. There could be synthetic prims or syncretic prims that you combine things. And so I think seeing it in a purely zero-sum game may not be the best way. Or it doesn't fully reflect the complexity of the evolution.
I didn't mean that one statement captures it, but I would say that's sort of what's going on. And one of the things you mentioned is that the party in power will, in its effort to steal resources from its enemy and give them to itself, they will certainly use the mutational power conferred by having the presidency to change the positional cultural preens of America so as to make sure there's less positions for that their enemies can hold. So those positions may be abolished, and there'll be more new positions created for their friends, let's say. Yes?
I'm having a hard time agreeing with that. I mean,
Okay.
I'm thinking they're saying this in a metaphorical way, because I don't think at least in democracy, you should have enemies and friends, but yeah, you may have opposing opinions, other opinions, you vote every 4 years, and then these things change. So, I mean, I have a hard time accepting that like zero-sum competition for resources, but I mean, we can go with that. Actually, I have another, I mean, I know you want to say anything about that, we can disagree on that, but I have another bigger issue that I'm kind of waiting maybe to the time, if it's not the time to bring it up, then we can talk it later.
Go ahead.
Which is, so you keep talking about societies, or you've been talking about societies, and I see societies are actually being composed by individuals. And if I take this kind of prim theory and I look at my genes as one type of prims, I guess, my prims are a mixture of many things, and then my ideas are a mixture of many ideas. And I probably belong to many societies. I belong to the society that people that live in Los Angeles, and the society that people that have a PhD in computer science. So I have many societies. And when you begin to talk about these societies and you say, well, this society does that or what, I see that in some situations that may crystallize. So when America goes to war with Japan, let's say, at some point, all those individuals coalesced and said, fine, I'm part of the Japanese group or I'm part of the American group. and I take a strong position in being a member of that society. But for most other things that are not so drastic, I don't think it's that simple. I think individuals belong to, quote, multiple societies. So a lot of this discussion, it seems a bit kind of extreme, and I think it ignores this fact that societies and primes and so on, they live on individuals. They don't live, they live, they exist on embodied individuals as opposed to by themselves in some kind of ethereal realm.
Right.
But individual does, and individuals are mixtures of primes.
They absolutely are, and I'll address that directly in what we, come to later. Absolutely. See, there are preens, but like in physics, apparently you can never find quarks by themselves. They are always part of a collection of quarks that get together to form a proton or something. Okay. This is what happens. We've talked about preens being stored in physical things. Fine. But from the other view, we can take a physical thing and we can ask it, is it storing preens? Right? And the answer is very often yes. And it's not that it's just storing one preen, it's storing gazillions of preens. And we'll get to this shortly. You are a example of that. Yes, you have gazillions of preens. Yeah, genetic ones, cultural ones, and everything. And by the way, because they're all inside you, forming a preen set inside you, what happens is you've got all these preens who have each one of which has its own evolutionary destiny. And so you, as a human being, have to deal with the fact that you're going to have preens inside of you that are at odds with each other. And okay, that's one comment, and we'll see more about that. But another thing is what you've described. This is my view, and I very much appreciate your talking and your view. I think what you described is, boy, these things are really, really, really complicated. Okay. And it's sort of hard to know what's going on because so many things are going on at any particular moment. Right. And what I'm trying to do here is say, yeah, it's a real witch's brew of things happening. And it's very hard to look into that cauldron of seething things that are going on and try to say, oh, but there are some underlying principles. It is not just all random stuff. There are some things that we can say about this. And that's what preen theory is. It's saying that at least part of all this confusion and these arguments that people are having about politics or going to war or this or that, or despite all that, there are some things that are actually going on underneath it, which are common to all of them, and which is what preen theory is pointing out. And I'm asserting that what I said about all this stuff is the distilling out of the morass of stuff going on, some things that are really fundamental to the whole process. Okay, and I think you can continue, and everyone will continue to see things as very complex and choose what they think's true or false or grand or whatever they want to say. But you have an alternative view. And to view that there's also these things called preens, and that societies are all about cultural preens, and we know what to expect to happen to some extent because of this underlying truth. Now, that's a lot of stuff to say. But anyway, that's my view. For
Professor, I had
example, yes, please.
one more question. I know we're talking about the Democratic and kind of Republican um, sub-societies, right? And their associated
Yes.
cultural presets. From the view of a preen, let's just say I have. So the question is really, why do these preens not want to immediately eliminate each other the first chance they get, right? Why is it such that for as long as this time has had, um, we have this kind of pair of kind of sub-society groups. I'm trying to phrase within preen speak, so give me a
Yeah,
couple
please
seconds.
do.
Why is it that we continue to have these opposing pairs of preen cultural sets as opposed to the second one preen set gets enough kind of cultural power, enough cultural power within the kind of broader American society preen
Yeah.
set, they just say remove every single, opposite group that we can detect, as opposed to let's take resources over.
Well, I think very good question. And the answer is they would if they could,
Mhm.
but they can't, right? I mean, uh, you can be pretty, I mean, yes, the other sub society is not going to go easy. It's got resources and it will use those resources to fight the other society,
Mhm.
right? It's a battle. It's
Oh,
the same thing. Huh?
oh, I was gonna say that's actually really good. I was thinking if you think about it as like a battle, it might be that they don't do it because the persecution of an opposing sub-society ends up strengthening the opposing sub-society, right? It's possible that.
Yeah, yes, it's certainly possible. They can do a bad job of stealing resources from the other society. So you got to be careful, right? I mean, uh, yeah,
Okay.
isn't that like you know, why don't the lions eat all of the gazelles? I don't know if they, but gazelles,
Yeah.
right? Okay, they would if they could, but the gazelles have defenses and things. Okay.
Right.
And you can also overplay your hand, right? You can go for more than you should, and you might create a revolution,
Mhm.
a backlash. You might
Right.
strengthen your enemy as well. For example, uh, uh, countries often, I think historically, provoke actions by their enemies so that the original society can say, look what they did to us. Let's all
Mhm.
unite and get that guy,
Right.
right? There is common strategy.
Mhm.
Okay, but I like this discussion because we're getting down to why I think preen theory is valuable. Uh, because what you just did was you thought in preen theoretic terms. Okay, and that's what I like. And yes, it's an alternative view to the normal human view of what's going on in the world. All right. So okay, so let's see. Okay. So these sub-societies form a sort of societal ecosystem.
These ecosystems can be as intricate as those considered in biology. A society can sometimes be divided into two or more sub-societies such that virtually all members of the society fall into exactly one of them. For example, American society contains the old and young sub-societies, the rich and poor sub-societies, the democratic and republican sub-societies, the North and South sub-societies, the state sub-societies. These disjoint
Disjoint is a mathematical word that's discussing when two sets have no intersection with each other. So that's why I used it here, but you can ignore it. It doesn't matter much.
These disjoint sub-societies typically have different cultural presets, and they are almost always in conflict to some degree. When such conflicts become sufficiently heated, we may use terms such as civil war, schism, or insurgency to describe them. For example, the American Civil War, the Islamic Schism, the American Insurgency, also called the American Revolution.
Right. So whenever you get two sub-societies that have not a lot of members or overlap of their then you have the possibility of taking the larger sub-society and dividing it. Okay. And we see these divisions start along all sorts of lines: rich, poor, Democrat, Republican, North, South, states. Okay. And so the process of societies existing is constantly under threat by the possibility that it will fall apart because sub-societies will try to go their own way or start wars with other sub-societies. Yes. And so, we constantly see some established nation have a sub-society that suddenly decides it doesn't want to be part of the nation anymore. And so it tries to get away from the nation. And, if the sub-society that's trying to get away shares a lot in common with your society's cultural preens, then you're likely to see them as freedom fighters. If they don't have a lot in common with your cultural preens, then you're likely to see them as, insurgents. But what's the difference? Okay. All right. So, that's all I wrote on societal ecosystems. But I think it's a very rich area for further investigation. So let me give you one question that I've contemplated but don't have an answer to. And that's, okay, so America's got a bunch of sub-societies. And China has a bunch of sub-societies, and lots of societies have sub-societies. Okay. But is there such a thing as a universal society? That is, are all the societies and sub-societies we see out there part of some big society?
Yeah,
You know,
Professor,
yes.
I can try to give an answer to that.
Thank you.
So yeah, my name is Kamran, but I think in general,
Kamran.
I have to believe there are. I think there's just central ideas or themes that a lot of like these sub-societies still align with, even though there are like certain focuses of thought or like ideas that sort of mutate, like as you say, and become a little bit more niche so that that's a sub-society. But overall, if you look at most subgroups they all like have certain themes, right? Maybe about being empathetic towards human beings, or this universal idea of growth or positivity or betterment for like, individuals, or just overall like advancement of society in certain sense. So these sorts of central themes are similar and I guess make us into like this universal group. But when we come down to like very focuses on like what that could be or how we can get there, that's when we become to like extremes of like concentrations where we split off into sub-societies and people like, I guess, like you said, conflicts arise. At least that's like my opinion on it.
Yeah, so let me ask you a question because I don't know the answer to this. The Democrats and the Republicans are sub-societies of America.
Yeah.
Now take America and China,
Yeah.
American society and Chinese society. Are they sub-societies of some bigger society?
I I would have to say so, right? I mean, when we even break down Democrats and Republicans, their central theme is to make great America the greatest place to live, to make it have better for their people. And then when you think about China to the US, it's again, which like making their people better. But overall, the whole objective is as society, we want to make sure that our people are basically successful. They're growing. They're like living in a sort of positive environment. And if you think about like the central theme about like what it is as human beings that we want to feel like, like sort of complete, sort of like, that we're like accomplishing something of greater like thing. And I think that's sort of like central theme is something of similar thing, but it's a different way of like accomplishing it. That's why we have the US believing that there's certain ways to like approach certain themes and like environments, and the Chinese choosing to do so as well.
Well, uh, so Cameron, let me ask you this. Name a single cultural preen, and you sort of did, but I'm not sure I buy what you named. Okay, name a single cultural preen that is shared by the Chinese society and all of its sub-societies and the American society and all of its sub-societies. What one single preen would we say they share?
Um, uh, m- I'm not sure if this would qualify as a preen, but I
Uh-huh.
guess like, maybe like something like this idea of quality of life, right? Everyone wants like their day to day to be some like better in one way or the other, right? We're all looking towards like every day of our lives, like leading towards like some sort of growth. I guess maybe that might not be qualified as a cultural preen,
No,
but
no, you might be on the right path. So um it I think we could say, roughly speaking, that all humans have some genes in common.
yes.
I mean, you know, there's subtle arguments here, but have some genes in common. And we could take all the genes they have in common and say they are common to every human's gene set.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I guess the question is, and we could say those genes themselves are the cultural preens of the collection, the society of humans. But they're not cultural preens. So I'm getting confused too, but they're not cultural preens. They're genetic preens if we look to the genes. So is there a single thing that all societies would agree on as belonging? Take all the sub-societies that exist in the world, societies and sub-societies, and take the intersection of all their cultural preens. Is anything left?
When you put it like that, maybe not necessary. Like you said, like there's a central theme, like you said, like of like a genetic preen
Yeah.
or genetic idea, and we all share that sort of thing. But then when it comes down to like what it means to accomplish or like going into specifics, right? Each sub-society has been broken down in this way because we believe in different philosophies and how to accomplish that or how to achieve that or how to like, continue to like build on the principles that we believe in, right? And that's why
Right.
you say like there are like separations in like sovereign states or even within like sovereign states, like different sections of like philosophy, democratic, republican in a sense. So maybe you are right in that sense.
Yeah. So I don't know the answer, a good way to handle this, but perhaps John Machado will help us.
I, I just thought of couple of examples. So one would be mathematics. I think mathematics is something that was independently developed in different cultures, and I think similar to the prime number that sort of resuscitates from the not the prime number, the Pythagorean's theorem
Pythagorean theorem.
that resuscitates from extinction. I think those are arguably cultural preens. Math has arguably a lot of cultural preens that maybe are independent of humans.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, just a second example I thought about, but this is not necessarily universal, like strictly speaking, right? But music is something that seems to have been developed independently across many different cultures, across many different years.
Yes, I agree with you, and those are very good thoughts. And it also raises the question, are, mathematical, well, okay. So this is an example of a question that I don't have a good resolution to, but I think it's a good thing. But this discussion has also given me a new idea, a didactic idea. So let's try it out. I may ask you after you give your opinion about something to say, put on your preen theory hat, look at that situation, and tell me what a preen theorist would say about it. That way, you'll be forced to take the preen theoretic view, which is one of my goals. Okay, Nathan, please go.
I had two examples that might be helpful or
Yes.
might just be a subset of the genetic ones. The first one was the idea of like the origin story for a society.
Mhm.
We have similar to like the idea of like all the mathematics. A lot of societies have their own individual origin story, and they all seem to crop up organically without kind of any kind of inside interference.
Yeah.
Um, the other one was like just kind of this like general refrain of being nice to other people within your society, which I'm not experienced enough within the field of genetics to know if that's a genetic component or is that something that kind of just arises out of the need for a society.
Right. Good thoughts, but something that is relevant to me when I hear those ideas. For example, you talked about being nice to other members of your society. Okay, and this is a bit of a digression, but Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am," right? Okay. Now, he said that as he was searching for a truth he could believe in. Yes? So, for example, he's no idiot, that's for sure. He says, "I can't believe what I'm getting through my senses because they'll lie to me." For example, I think this is his example. If I put a stick in a vessel of water and look at it, I'll see that the stick has bent. Refraction, we call it now. But it's not really, there's no bent stick at all, right? But my senses would be telling me that. So he says that won't do as a truth. I can't rely on my senses. So he says the one thing he finally comes up with, I think, therefore I am, right? Okay, but to me, it is not a universal truth because, for example, Darwin thinks so. Excuse me. I keep saying Darwin when I mean Descartes. Descartes says Descartes thinks, so Descartes exists. So Descartes is saying he exists, right? And he's sure of that. Now, what did he say about Nathan existing? Nothing, right? And further, if you believe in Descartes' thing, then Nathan thinks Nathan exists. So this
And
universe, huh?
and no one else exists, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it
I
is
mean, okay, so his universal truth is a truth, but no two people's truth are the same. So what exactly is this one thing that you think is true? No one else thinks it's true. It's a curious truth, right? So we get into the problem of let's see, you talked about every society says be nice to your other members of your society, but right, it's the same sort of thing. Be nice to all of the Chinese, be nice to all the Americans, be nice to all the Russians, right? But they aren't saying, it's not universal, be nice to everybody. Okay, so there's a little bit of danger in that. All right. Any more comments on this particular thing about the ecosystem? And the open question I have about, is there a universal system? So as promised, we're going to turn to chimpanzees. Okay, so recall that
Excuse me?
we 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 started to look at chimpanzees. Does anybody recall our discussion of that? So if somebody does, please summarize where we were. And John?
Yeah, I think I can try to summarize it. So I think we started asking if chimpanzees had cultural prints themselves, right?
Mhm.
And I think
Yes.
we did a few examples of how they organize their society with a hierarchy, and there's sometimes an alpha male which is dominant and behaves aggressively, and so it seems like they do have cultural prints themselves. And then we asked, where do they come from? And I guess presumably they come from their genetic prints, and um, and then we also ask, where are these cultural prints in the chimpanzees, right? And then I personally don't know where they are, but I guess in their heads or in their thoughts or someplace
Yeah.
like that. And then I think the key question was, can they modify their cultural prints without modifying their genetic prints?
Wow, what a great summary. I am so jealous. I mean, I, I wish I had that kind of memory. Uh, okay, so we're going to discuss this further because the discussion, it's an open problem for us, and the discussion led me to contemplate it a little bit, and I think I have something more to say about it. All right, so by the way, something I'd like to try, but maybe you guys don't, so it's not a mandatory. But I'd like to see more actual people. So if you're comfortable with it, can you? Thank you, Nathan. Great. Ryan, others, Marcus. Oh yeah, catcher. This is great, Martino. Yeah, I like this. Okay, so I was thinking about the chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees, for example, do not write things down, for example. Okay, and so if we ask if they have cultural preens at all, the question is, if they do, they have to be stored someplace. Okay. And it seems like the only place available in a chimpanzee is its brain, right? I don't see where else it can store cultural preens. So it's its brain. But then I thought there's more to be said, because chimpanzees can learn, right? And they can learn by being taught by their parents. We saw that in the case of nest building. But they can also learn on their own. Okay, from what I call experience or experiential preens. For example, probably, I'm guessing, because what do I know about chimpanzees, that if a chimpanzee sees fire for the first time and sticks his hand in there, he probably doesn't do it again. Right? That is within him, and this is genetically endowed, the programming of his brain and everything, and we'll get into it more later. Within him, he is probably has the program and the brain computer sufficient that he can actually learn from that experience and probably learn not to put his hand in again. Yes, Isabel.
Like, that sounds like epigenetics.
Does it? Okay, let's see. Does it?
Kind of, and don't they also have chip so you also pass down like reactions from your experience to your offspring?
Yes.
Yeah, so like epigenetics sounds like it's
Well, first of all, yes, it does sound like epigenetics, but it's not being carried on genetic material. Like the epigeneticists look at methylations and things like that that slightly modify DNA. I would just say it's non-genetic, okay, rather than epigenetic. I think they're equal partners. And by the way, another aside, because I'm, making these things. The day you were born, you had completed whatever transfer of genetic preens you were ever going to receive from your parents to you. Yes? That was the end of the process when you were born. It actually occurred a little earlier, but that's not the point. Being born is sort of a well-recognized moment in your life, so we say you're born then. But all the genetic preens that your parents were ever going to give you had been transferred. But that was more or less just the beginning of the transfer of their cultural preens to you. All right. So to some extent, you have a birthday, but maybe you should have a second birthday. And that's when you stop listening to your parents, right? Because that's when you sort of end the transfer of cultural preens. All right. So, yeah, adolescence should come with a, birthday party or something, for the. Anyway, a little aside, but I think that, yes,
But
Isabel?
like I thought genes like turn off and on based on like environmental factors too, right? So even if
Mm.
you like have passed down, but like the expression might not come like if you don't experience certain things, right?
Yeah. That's true, but the genes you store that you got from your parents are stored. Now, how they respond to the environment you're in, that's a second and important question, but it's not the same question.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
All right. Ryan?
I was gonna say regarding the idea of like where are these cultural prints stored, I think there's a certain like amount of like state in the society itself. So like think about relationships, right? So like the idea of chimp society is like it's like encoded in the relationships that exist between chimps, right? So if you were to um like completely wipe like all of the relationships away from chimp society, I think chimp society might not become the same thing it is now because you're like essentially wiping chimp society out of like memory, if that makes sense. So I think
No,
it's sort of encoded
okay.
in brains, but I think it's like encoded in like a shared like meta brain, if that makes sense.
Well, to some extent, it does make sense. Uh, but we could just as well be talking, for example, about a nuclear family of humans. And they certainly have cultural preens, right? And different family groups have different cultural preens. We discussed this a little bit before. So, but now, and the families have relationships. Okay. But quantifying those relationships is difficult for me in the way you've put it forward, Ryan. And so what I can believe is that the society has cultural preens. And for example, presumably the parent has cultural preens that direct, that affect his relationship to the people he has mutational control over. So it's a good observation. I don't know how to neatly fit it into everything we're talking about. But yeah, let's keep going. Okay, so, but I'm guessing that the chimpanzee, if he puts his hand in fire, is likely not to do it again, that he has enough evolutionary development of a brain and the software that goes with it that he wouldn't, that he can learn those things. Okay. Now, because we have evidence that parents can teach the young, it seems to me there might be a good chance that the young chimpanzee may be able to learn from his parents to stay away from fire. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to get his hand burned to learn that lesson. He acquires it because it's been learned, right? And I would say that that is then a cultural preen that didn't exist until the first chimpanzee got his hand burned. Okay. And then it existed. And so I think therein, I suspect we see the beginning. So even though all of it's always stored in brains, it in fact does seem to evolve and change and be a cultural preen. There's a set of cultural preens in the chimpanzee group, and it can change and evolve. What do you think?
I think that pretty much gets to the answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think perhaps the disadvantage of chimpanzees is that their cultural prints they don't survive for long, so it's hard to think of these examples. But we externalize our knowledge, our representations of the world, and so this helps our cultural prints to last longer, I guess. And
Yeah.
and we think we're better
Oh.
thinkers as well, obviously, but
Yeah, and I agree with you on what you said, and I have more to say, and it's related to that. So if now I want to turn to early man, and by early man, I mean humans that existed, in this case, prehistoric humans. Do you know what I mean by prehistoric humans? In the strict sense, history is written history, and anything before it is prehistory, prehistoric. So what if we consider humans before the Sumerians presumably invented writing 3,500 years BC? They, it appears, could only store their cultural prints in their brains like the chimpanzee, right? But if you look at a I guess it's a Paleolithic human being and a Neolithic human being, different time periods. We went from, presumably some form of hunting and gathering to agriculture. Yes. So that suggests to me that even without external means of storing preens, cultural preens, you can get very significant evolution, right? Even though, John was arguing they're sort of short term. Well, maybe they are, but I think it sounds to me like humans are sort of no different. And all those little changes eventually led to agriculture, right? And that's a huge change in our society, even before we could write things down. So that's another piece of this puzzle of how things work. Yes.
Thanks, Professor. But I just meant that being able to write it down has even more, let's say, infectious property, because it's like in the smallpox example, you found another host, right? Once you saved the smallpox genes in a computer, you found another host. So in terms
Exactly.
it's if you're thinking right in evolution and how things spread, this is even a stronger boost, right?
Exactly. And I was going to get there. You not only remember more than me, but you're ahead of me in this thinking. Okay, so yes, I was going to get there. So, but something special seems to happen when you get writing. And writing doesn't necessarily mean, writing. For example, tattooing or something can be a way of storing cultural preens and things like that. Okay, but once you have an external place, a non-meme place to store it, right? Then something very special happens. And so societies change dramatically once you have writing. And I want to go and explore what change that provokes, right? What is the difference in a society that has writing and one that doesn't? Okay, but at this point, I'm fairly convinced that chimpanzees do have cultural preens and that they evolve. And they do all the things cultural preens do. And I think humans, even before writing, had that, but that something special happens once you can externalize these cultural preens. I wanted to, rather than go in that direction right now, I wanted to discuss let's look at ants. You know, ants form a society, right? There's a gazillion ants, and they're all, you know, the queen does thing, and they use chemical signals to tell each other stuff and all like that. So the question is, can we extend some of preen theory to ants? Do they have cultural preens too? Chimps, I think the answer is yes. But do ants?
I mean, there's like the queen, and like there are different positions within the ant colony.
Yes.
So they certainly have like some kind of positional preens or positional cultural preens.
They have positions, but yeah. Okay, go on. Again, we're at the question of, is it all now genetic? You know, that do they have their positions conferred just by their genes, or is there actually a culture there?
I think the queen ant is like actually like biologically different from the other ants, if I remember correctly. I think it's that way
You're
for
right.
bees. I think it's also like that for ants. So it's most likely genetic in that case.
Yeah, so I think so, sort of too, that, you know, again, we're at this question, can the behavior of an ant colony eventually change dramatically? Yeah, it can if the ants undergo genetic changes that modify stuff, right? So, you know, there's all kinds of ants running around. They don't all behave the same. So genetically, you can get different behavior. But is there really, you know, some culture in the cultural preen sense that exists? Isabel?
I think I'm inclined to say yes because they have like collective behaviors, right? Like so it's like emergent behaviors. So like I feel like in that way I can see them having culture. I mean, I know nothing about ants, so I don't know. But I do know that like they have emergent behaviors. So I think I'm inclined to say yes.
Okay, but by the way, I don't know much about ants either. So, but I know more about bees.
Mm.
Not that I know much about bees, but John also knows more about bees apparently. So let's talk about bees because maybe we'll have something more to say. You're right, Isabel. The queen bee is, oh wait, well that was more Ryan, I guess. The queen bee is physically different. Uh, and as a matter of fact, the organization of the culture is quite amazing. So let me just describe it because I don't know how to address it, our our overall question, but this will be data that we can use. Okay, so in a beehive, roughly speaking, there's a queen, there are workers, and there are drones. These three positions, if you will. Okay. There is one queen. I suppose we're, you know, a beekeeper might know better, but basically there's one queen. And all of the workers are female. And further, all of the workers are, except in very strange, weird conditions, cannot mate. Okay. And okay. And so they're and when a egg is laid by the queen, it either becomes a worker or it can be fed this stuff called royal jelly. And then another class of bee, and I call them, I don't know what others call them, virgin queens. Okay. Because these are neither workers' drones, so I should have said there's 4 classes of positions. These virgin queens will just hang out, it appears. Okay. And there's not a big number of them. But if the actual queen should die, then the virgin queens, my understanding, engage in a battle to the end with one another. Okay. They all start killing each other until only one remains. You know, this is, you know, there's a word for it. Anyway, okay. Only one remains. And then that virgin queen flies out of the nest and hopes to encounter a drone bee from a different nest, presumably, and mate with it. And the virgin queen is now a queen if she mates. And the virgin queen will store the sperm of the drone who dies and go back and form her own nest or inhabit the old nest and start taking over the role of the original queen. Okay, so this bizarre situation, here's just a bizarre thing that happens with bees. Even though the workers can't mate, assume that they did mate with some drone, you know, that comes along, and they had offspring. Those offspring would be less related to the worker bee than the offspring of the original queen would be. That is, the worker bee's offspring bear less genes in common with the worker bee than the than one of its sisters that's born to the queen. She shares more genes in common with her sister than her own offspring. Okay, anyway, those are some data points which I can see you've appreciate immensely about what bees do. So we're back to the question, can bees actually make cultural changes without making genetic ones? I don't know, but my intuition is they can't. That what's needed minimally is some place to store information that is not in the genes. I don't know. Okay. But I do think that we've made some progress here in terms of our question about cultures that are non-human. You know? Okay, let's just go to the next question that we avoided earlier. What is the impact of writing in whatever form writing takes? Why does writing change everything? So humans have been around long before writing, but I think the cultural changes that occur once writing is available are of a different class.
I had a really interesting thought on this, but it reminds me a lot of like the Markov assumption within like probability. Like
Yeah.
when you get writing or some other permanent way of like passing information along, you drop that Markov assumption. So now all of the like new events become conditioned on everything before instead of just conditioned on the most recent set of events.
Hey, I don't know that particular Markov. Did you say axiom or law or assumption?
The Markov assumption is basically if you have a sequence of events, then they're Markov if the probability of a n plus 1 given a n is like it doesn't matter what came before a n.
Yes, yes. So it's like, I guess in probability theory, independent random variables kind of thing.
Yeah,
Not that
it's
I'm good in
independent of
either.
everything that came before the
Right.
previous event. So it matters only what
Memoryless.
happened latest.
Yes, memory list. So that's a good thought. Right. And so uh, now if you're going to have memory, that means you have some way of storing state. It seems inevitable, right? So we saw that chimps can store state, for example, in their brains. And we also saw that genes can store state. I think we saw that in, how enzymes work and stuff. That's a bit of a mumble. But in the ant, you're sort of suggesting, Ryan, and I think it's a good, hypotenuse here, is that we can store. Nobody laughs at my little jokes. Okay, never mind. All right. So I think that we can store the question becomes for ants might be, does an ant have another way other than than genetically, whatever I mean by that, of storing information, memory? And I think there's something in what you've raised the question about, Ryan. I mean, can you say more about it? I mean, maybe
I
you have a
mean,
better sense.
ants also like this is very similar to the chimps case, but ants would have like some sort of organizational hierarchy, I think. So that would again sort of like store information. So I mean, I guess in some sense that's like a meta way of passing information on. So like when a new ant is born into an ant society, they can learn from their parents, how to be an ant in like whatever that means, but also they'll learn from the rest of the ant society what their place is in ant society. And in that way, the idea of ant society lives on longer than just any single ant.
Okay, so I don't buy that, Ryan. I'm not sure that an ant, a newborn, excuse me, were bees, right? Just as good as bees. Okay, when you get a newborn bee, it hatches from an egg. Um, I'm not sure it learns a thing about anything. That it's just a pre-programmed stimulus response machine.
Maybe I don't
And-
know enough about insects.
Well, but I thought like, but don't they display like collective behaviors? So they have like some kind of collective memory? Like,
Well, yeah, but does it ever change? Without genetic change, does it ever change? Do ants, take a species, take a one hive, and uh, is it the case that that hive will suddenly learn to do things differently? It may adapt to the environment in some pre-programmed, predictable way, but I don't think it. I sort of okay, so I sort of think it's a memoryless uh, automaton. Okay, so like you could build a robot, and every time it sees a red light, it could, bang itself on the right side of its head. And every time it sees a green light, it does, something like that. That requires no memory. It doesn't matter how many times it banged itself on the right side will affect what it does when it sees a green light that says bang your head on the left side, right? That's memoryless. And so I'm suggesting, that maybe all of the bees in a beehive are just such pre-wired memoryless devices. And certainly memoryless devices can, if you have a whole bunch of them, exhibit very complex behavior, right? But they're memoryless. And if they're memoryless, it's sort of, is that where we draw the line about cultural preens? That something has to have a memory in order to have cultural preens. Is that the dividing line? Okay, Julian, please.
Yeah, so uh I was gonna make a point on the question you had before, which was
Mhm.
how the use of writing changed how
Mhm.
maybe preens were distributed and
Yes.
how they were carried down. So I was gonna
Mhm.
say like obviously beforehand information came from people you knew. You could only spread your ideas and your beliefs to those around you, to those you had first hand or maybe second, third hand contact with.
Absolutely.
And with writing, I mean, if you look at like the big religions of the world, a lot of them have some sort of sacred text, the Bible, the Quran, and like Hinduism, they have like the Vedas, right?
Yeah.
Also like think of like big revolutions, like the Protestant Reformation. They
Mhm.
probably, this huge 1,000-year overdue stand against like Catholicism, and it only happened because of like printing press, right? Gutenberg. Um, so
Well,
basically,
okay,
that
yes, go ahead. Right.
yeah, to make information large scale and ideas large scale is huge. Like, or like law systems, you have like Hammurabi's code, the Roman laws. Like, you can like tell people, share ideas for people that you don't have immediate contact with, that you'll never meet, that might live 1,000 years after you.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
Koreans have like a new life and a new way of sharing that's timeless.
Exactly. I mean, I concur right down the line with everything you said. Uh, okay. Let me get some more responses. I don't know. Is there a good? Oh, I see. There's a wait. All right. Nathan. Nathan.
Yes, I know it might be weird to jump around. I was gonna go back to talking about like ants and their like whether or not they have cultural prunes.
Okay.
So I don't exactly know if this is a good analogy, but if you accept that an ant is memoryless, and you said it was like an automaton, like I'm comparing it in my mind.
Well, wait. I'm not
Uh,
asserting that ants are memoryless, but if they're memoryless, I don't think they can have cultural preens, is my current position. Yes, go ahead, Nathan.
So, like, if an ant is like one cell in something like John Conway's Game of Life or some other automaton, maybe like the ant itself can't have memory, but like the system as a whole can. In which case,
Yeah.
like, I don't exactly know like if this would work, but like maybe the ant colony does have memory outside of genes, even if no single ant could express it.
I hear what you're struggling with there. And I think your use of cellular automata, which is due to Conway, as I recall, the Game of Life is one example of it, is a really good example for us to keep in mind because those cells are genuinely memoryless. And yet they can show emergent behavior that is extraordinarily complex, right? And as a matter of fact, they had a big impact on my life. So I'm going to tell one of my stories. Okay, so what happened was, remember I told you about Martin Gardner, the guy who published the first thing on RSA, and who had a big influence on mathematicians at the time, of my generation. Well, when I was between my undergraduate and graduate degrees, I was working at the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. And Martin Gardner published this article on Conway's Game of Life. Probably most of you have encountered the Game of Life. Okay. And so, and Martin Gardner asked a question about the fate of the R pentomino, which was what was called what'd you call it? A Garden of Eden sort of structure that you set out, and then you let it evolve through the rules, and you wanted to know what happened. And Conway, oh, okay, interesting, Isabel. Martin Gardner asked an open question. He said, what is the fate of the R pentomino? Okay, well, I happen to have access to the Federal Reserve's computers, right? This is before any of us had personal computers and stuff. And, though it was supposed to be running the monetary system of the United States and everything, I thought it wouldn't hurt if it also ran a program to figure out what happened to the R pentomino. And so I discovered that the R pentomino would grow forever. It would not reach a finite state. Yeah, it eventually produced what are called gliders. And so I told my answer in writing to Martin Gardner, and he listed in the next edition of Scientific American those who had figured out the fate of the R pentomino. And there were like 9 of us, and I was one of them. And I think that's the first time my name ever appeared in print, right? So, yeah, the cellular automata, big deal to me. Okay. Anyway, let's get more comments. Okay. The next one I have here is John again. Okay, asked to unmute. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, just very, very quick comment. If having memory is maybe the threshold for having cultural preens, maybe there's an analogy with a theory of computation with exactly what we have been saying, right? Finite state automata and being able to do some computation, and then Turing completeness with the Turing machine having the tape and the ability to have state. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's an interesting analogy.
Yeah, I think it is one, and it rings true with me. Yes, so it is sort of the difference between finite automaton and more sophisticated computational devices, including all the way up to Turing machines, because there are things in between. Yeah, that's a good thought. Okay. Jose
So
Luis.
I was going to say about the innate behaviors. I mean, I think you're talking about innate behavior. Well, people are discussing if innate behaviors exist, and I think they're.
Say it again, please.
I think you're discussing whether innate behaviors exist, meaning behaviors that you manifest at birth without having to have learned them through
Yeah.
means.
Mhm.
It seems I was Googling at the same time as you were speaking. And there are innate behaviors, and I found a couple of examples, which it seems complex things, and I'm not sure the mechanism, my limits of my knowledge of biology. I have limits of my knowledge of biology. But I found one, it seems like, I don't know, a particular type of herring, a particular gull, a particular type of bird. The newborn chicks are innately kind of looking for the beak of the mother that has some red dots. And they would do that innately, basically, since birth. And you can put like a stick with a few red dots and they will peck at it because they're kind of built in.
Yes.
There's another example that I found on, and this has a mechanism. This is more like epigenetic kind of transference. So it seems that some psychiatric or psychological disorders can be somehow inherited due to stress from the mother. So somebody who would, I mean, a mother that has been sensitive to a lot of stress may transmit particular epigenetics that make some of the offspring having additional kind of mental issues. But that's an epigenetic issue. That's not a very long-term kind of transfer, but it's a transfer between generations.
Okay, you're saying that there's just so I understand, this will be a good data point. You're saying that there's scientific evidence that if a mother is stressed while having a baby in her womb, that we will see epigenetic changes in her genes. I mean, I don't think it's going to change the sequence of genes just because she was stressed, but epigenetic. So, okay, that's.
I put the article on the chat. People want to click on it.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not an expert on this. Okay, I do work with some people in mental disorders, but
okay, yeah.
But epigenetic. The more interesting one about the memory we're talking about is how these more complex behaviors, like the pecking behavior of a chick as was born, how that was encoded into the genetics. Because I don't think that's probably, it doesn't feel as epigenetic. It feels that somehow some complex behavior got kind of written down. That's kind of Lamarckian, but I don't know what the mechanism is.
Yeah, but it's a good example of memoryless, I think it is, memoryless reaction. So it wouldn't
but
be
actually, I
surprising.
wouldn't describe it as memoryless. I mean, like, that behavior is stored in your DNA or in your epigenetic. So it is, there's a memory. It's what kind of.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's not.
You're right.
They're not. Yeah, at some point, I don't know exactly how to categorize this. If there's an environmental trigger that kind of turns on this particular behavior, if it's a complex behavior, I don't know, that's stored somewhere. The question is, can you, in one generation, can you learn that behavior and transmit it to the next, which is kind of very Lamarckian? That I don't know if it does happen, but there's some complex behavior that seem to be innate. That's my only point.
Oh, complex behavior that's innate can happen in even the memoryless things. I mean, finite automata, excuse me, cellular automata, no cell has memory, but the behavior, I mean, it turns out that in fact, cellular automata are a universal computer. So even though the components, like for example, even your cell phone, I think, or any computer you own, I think it just consists of, well, it certainly had, anyway, I won't go there because I don't have clear thoughts. All right, well, listen, I really enjoyed that. Let's do more of that, and we'll learn some more stuff.